out, and I've been working full-time for Navitas, which is a company that really helps schools work through their facility issues. And we had a lot of success in the North Kansas City School District on a particular program, and I just kind of want to share with some of those results today. But again, I can remember back in the day sitting here in St. Joe at 925 Felix, and again, the last 17 years in North Kansas City, and one of my biggest jobs was to try to balance the budget. And as you well know, there's by far more needs than there are resources available. And again, the assessed valuation, the student enrollment, the Prop C sales tax, the state foundation formula, what's going to happen with your federal funds, all of those were daily conversations on how to make the system go. But really and truly, the biggest rock of all that I personally found after a 33-year career with in public finance really was really controlling your energy costs within your facilities. And actually, I found over $30 million just recently that the North Kansas City School District was able to reinvest in their schools. And if I could for just a few minutes, and we'll feed you lunch, but talk about how we did that. And by doing that, we didn't have to go out and issue new general obligation bonds. We didn't have to raise the tax levy, but instead what we did is just turned over rocks within our own organization and found dollars. And long story short, we found about $1,500 per student in North Kansas City by just turning over rocks within our own organization. And if we could do that across the state of Missouri, I think there's some real untapped resources that are available to all of you. But again, what I always tried to do was balance both sides of the ledger. Again, try to maximize our revenues, as we talked earlier, and also control our expenditures. The revenues are tricky, as you well know. Obviously, we're limited by state statute on the type of revenues that we can generate. So again, property taxes are the biggest one for most school districts across the state of Missouri. But also, in order to generate those, you definitely rely on your property tax levy, and that can be very challenging at times if you need to increase that to increase more current property taxes for your school district. So more than ever, school districts really need to really control their expenditures. And what we know more than anything else is about 80% of all school districts across the nation spend about, get about 80% of their operating budget on salaries and benefits. And so we're definitely a people organization. So with out of every dollar, if 80% of it's already spent on personnel costs to employ our people, to educate our students, our hands are somewhat tied. But at the same time, included in there, we've got continual increases in health insurance premiums. The pension costs continue to go up over time. Transportation costs and aging fleets are always issues that we deal with. There's all sorts of new initiatives out there. Everybody always wants a 1-to-1 ratio for their students' computer ratio, and we're up here just trying to balance the budget and fix the leaky roofs and keep the plumbing held together. So again, what we're trying to do is find ways to balance everything and really balance our needs with the dollars available between our students, our staff, our instructional programming needs, our facility needs, and the latest initiative that your Board of Education might be wanting you to look at. So for years, I went through kind of budget reduction processes each year with our staff, and we cut $1,000 here, and we cut $1,000 here. And yeah, over time, that did amount to a few dollars, but really and truly, we were just cutting our own hands or cutting our fingers as we go forward, because we were making small cuts. They did obviously help us balance the budget, but the cuts that we made weren't always sustainable over time, especially if you're dealing with a growing school district and have more students coming to you at all times with increased needs. So really and truly, what I tried to look at more than anything else is, if we're going to have to turn our organization around, how's the best way to do it? How's the best way to balance our budget and have sustainable programs for the future? So again, the biggest rock that I found after going through all the travel budgets, the professional development budgets, the staffing ratios, all the transportation routes, all of those things really lies right within your own organization with your facilities. And if you can control your facility cost, it's going to help you sustain your school district over time. Kind of in some research, I've found that schools in the United States spend over $8 billion annually on utility bills, which is more than what they spend on textbooks and computers combined. So after schools spend 80% of their budget on personnel costs, there's only 20% left. And really what we're finding throughout the United States is of the 20% left, 11% of that is being spent statewide on operations of school facilities. So of the 20%, 11% is tied up in facilities. So that's really the impact of those organizations. So schools, again, are really trying to provide stimulating educational experiences inside aging school buildings while our energy bills continue to rise. So really and truly, I'm here speaking from experience, but over the next 15 years, if school districts were able to reduce their utility bills on an average of a minimum of 25%, there's at least $1.5 billion that could be redirected back into classrooms in Missouri schools. And I certainly can tell you that we have the proof that we did that at the North Kansas City School District. So it's kind of my mission in life right now to find ways to help schools. And certainly if I could get this message out to you today, we could certainly show you pathways in order to do that. And I can tell you, going through this process will probably be easier than going through the process that Jesse just described on recoding your general ledger. So take a deep breath and know it's not that bad. But again, in 2014, I was working with the North Kansas City School District, and we developed a list of over $200 million of facility needs. And that doesn't matter if it's $200 million with North Kansas City or if it's $2 million at any other school district across the nation. We obviously didn't have the funds to pay for it. So what I tried to do is work very hard to develop a 5-year facility plan, and so that we could be sure that our buildings were operating as efficiently as possible, so that if we did have to go out to ask voters for more money, that we could come back and say, we're doing this, this, and this, and here's proof, and here's our results, that we are operating as efficiently as possible, and therefore we are deserving to ask you to increase our tax levy or to approve additional bonds for new buildings. But again, when I was really dealing specifically in North Kansas City, which is a growing school district, of their facility needs, everybody always wanted to talk about new buildings. We wanted to build this, we wanted to build that, which was great. And actually the community was extremely supportive to do that. However, there was a lot of excitement about that. However, what I dealt with, though, was not only the need to build new buildings just because of the growth, but we had, again, 32 other buildings that were old and falling apart that also needed to be taken care of, and we didn't really have the dollars to do that. So again, we had to make sure that we had our operations as efficient as possible to address the 32 older buildings that nobody really wanted to talk about. They really were just more interested in the new ones. So again, the roof issues, the windows issues, plumbing problems, old lighting, HVAC systems, and the list goes on and on and on of the issues that we had to address in the current facilities, obviously became part of a plan on how we go forward. So one of the things that we looked at is specifically was our energy cost. And we found that in this slide right here, kind of looking at energy utilization index, that we were inefficient. And our schools were actually operating on about an average of using 74 kilowatts per BTU per square foot on average, which was high. And the only reason we knew that is because we did go through an energy audit by every one of our buildings to really know how much energy we were using. So knowing that our energy costs were high, and really and truly in our school district, probably just as well as yours and many, many others across the nation, we would get our utility bills from the electrical companies and utility companies on a monthly basis, just running through our accounts payable department, and we were good. But nobody really truly sat and analyzed the usage of that. And the end results were millions of dollars were being paid to the utility company just because we signed off on the bills and went for there. So our plan really was to come up with a way to significantly reduce our energy usage, but my personal plan was we didn't want to do that by just changing human behavior, because that's really not sustainable over time. But instead, we wanted to do it by making mechanical and electrical enhancements to our building controls, so that in addition to slight changes in human behaviors, that our buildings could operate as efficiently as possible. But when we needed them to operate as efficiently as possible, more than any time at all, was in the evening hours and the nighttime hours when really nobody was in the building, to make sure that the appropriate setbacks were in place. So, again, by going through an energy audit, we really found out we were inefficient. We had the ability to make improvements and come up with a plan on how to do that. So back in 2014, we did go through a comprehensive study on how we wanted to put an energy plan in place. So we took the energy audit, and at that point in time, it was determined that the district could save over $24 million by just reducing our energy bills by 25% over a 15-year period of time. Plus, we were able to go back to the voters and actually get a $20 million bond issue passed. So our schools got over $44 million worth of improvements with a no tax increase by commingling a bond issue plus the money that we got for our energy savings. However, you do not have to go through that whole process. You could, if you didn't want to go through the bond part, you could really just go through an energy audit, determine what your savings are, and put a kind of a comprehensive plan in place to capitalize on those dollars that you would get savings from again, reinvesting in your plant, and use those dollars and savings over time to make the necessary improvements to your building that you want to. So again, the long list of needs was really taken and funded by just saving dollars on our energy costs. And again, what we did more than anything else was not to create an environment where people weren't comfortable. The majority of employees in the North Kansas City School District really had no idea of what enhancements were made to those buildings, because they were all behind the scene, really electrical and mechanical issues. So then with that being in place, we were really able to take the savings and replace aged and failing equipment, really develop new energy efficient strategies, kind of support conservation efforts from the Board of Education, and provide energy management focus with a plan on oversight. So again, we found the dollars to do this out of our existing budget, and again, the energy savings that we gathered really funded improvements to our district. And here's kind of some slides on how the program worked. Again, we found over $30 million just in savings from our existing facilities. And in addition, we were able to get rebates from the utility companies. So nevertheless, over $30 million of found money within our existing budget was basically being able to be reinvested. There's kind of 3 bars right here at the left-hand side that kind of talk about kind of an average school district. Obviously, every school district has maintenance costs, utility costs, and capital needs. And the question is, you know, how are you going to continue when you have increased pressure out there to fund new curricular items, new instructional needs, new staffing issues, requests to increase the salary schedules, et cetera. So again, looking at how to be as efficient as possible within your facilities frees up money for other programs. So again, in our case, we had the maintenance costs, utility costs, and the capital costs on this bar right here. We put a program together where we were able to shrink our maintenance costs, shrink our utility costs, shrink our capital costs, and pay for those out of our utility savings over a 15-year period of time. And again, by doing this comprehensive plan and putting all of our needs together in an energy program and ultimately issuing certificates of participation at this point in time, because we did it in a couple different phases, but at one point in time, we had $24 million available through a certificate of participation, which is different from a general obligation bond. But nevertheless, we were able to take that $24 million and reinvest it back into our facilities. And the result over a period of time, again, is our maintenance costs are down, utility costs are down, capital equipment costs are down because we took care of many items that were on the deferred maintenance list. And the savings now are kept by the school district after the investment that we made, for example, for the new electrical controls were paid for. So again, if you have a school district that is having problems passing a bond issue, passing a tax levy, you know that you've got facility issues out there, I'm just here to say that I know specifically, if you dig a little bit deeper within your existing organization and really specifically look at your facility usage and facility costs, there's probably a huge untapped resource out there that you can leverage dollars for. And what I like it more than anything else is then when we do go back to the voters, we can say we've done this, this, and this, and here's proof that we've done it. And therefore, we are operating as efficiently as possible, and therefore, we are deserving of more dollars. But again, I started working with Koby this summer. He helped us specifically as the North Kansas City School District do a lot. I'm going to turn it over to him to talk about the final points of the program.
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah, so I was going to talk just briefly about some of the results in a little more detail than he did, and then also talk a little bit about some of the things that you guys could do in your own school districts and kind of how we think about it and think through a plan of energy efficiency for schools. So one of the questions we get asked a lot is, how do we know that we're going to see results? How do we know that this is actually going to show savings? And this is actually just a few buildings from North Kansas City. The one example I have is actually Staley High School, which is a fairly energy efficient building that was built. It was LEED certified, ground source heat pumps, very, very efficient. And they felt like it kind of never ran as well as they thought maybe it should. In a lot of their schools, they had old efficient equipment that were replaced. In this particular school, they already had new efficient equipment that was less than 10 years old. And so in their situation, we actually just developed an operating plan and implemented some data analytics where, like at a school district like you guys, you look at data analytics for education, for finance, and you're looking at data, those kind of things. We've done a lot with that on the facility side as well, pulling in data, making sure systems and facilities are running the way they're supposed to. You can see on Staley, this bigger chart here, how in the October, November time frame was when we really started implementing some of the changes to the sequences of the controls, of how the building operates, and those kinds of things. And you can see the energy start to drop. And so they started off at about 74 kBTUs per square foot, which is when you take electricity and gas and combine them into a common form of energy. And so they started out about there. We're getting a lot of their schools down into the 30s. So 30 to 45 is kind of our target area for what we're trying to get their schools and their buildings to. And this just gives you an annual representation of some of these buildings. Of the kind of hatched bar is where they were before, the green bar is where they are now, and then on the right-hand side, there's a percentage, and that black dot is the percentage savings. And you can see some of them are 30 to 40% savings. There's actually one. That one right there is like 63% savings, which was pretty big. And we've got a couple that are like 15 or 20% savings as well. So building by building, it's a little bit different, but overall, we had planned on saving about 25%, and we are achieving about 34% for the district. And then they're getting some beneficial credit as well from I guess being validated through awards, both locally. They got their program submitted by actually KCPL, the local utility, to the Kansas City Industrial Council for award, and they received that. They also received the Missouri School Board Association's Board Award for Physical and Environmental Resources. Then is anybody familiar with Energy Star? Anybody heard of that before? So far, they've applied for 28 buildings to be Energy Star certified. And so out of their, I guess, 32 schools, 28 so far have been certified. We have to actually wait a whole year of data that's efficient data before we can submit. So we've got a couple of schools that we don't have full data on yet that we'll submit for when it is. Then they got a really neat award at the World Energy Engineering Congress, which is put on by the Association of Energy Engineers, and it was in Atlanta. But they had people from all over the world getting awards there, and North Kansas City went and received their award as well. You know, President George Bush was there, and lots of other kind of high-profile people. So that's kind of neat. So as far as what you can do and kind of how we think about a plan to energy efficiency, a lot of people talk really just about implementing equipment and upgrading systems. And that is a component of it, where there are typically new energy efficient systems out there that can replace some of your older ones. But also, you know, just like at Staley, if things aren't implemented correctly or things that aren't operated correctly, that can also have a major impact on what you see as results from an energy standpoint in your buildings. So we do energy consulting, trying to make sure that people are on the right rates with the utility company. You guys could actually request your utility company to review your rates and make sure that you're on the best rate through your utility. And they're required through the Kansas or through the MoPERC to do that for you if you request it. Also, we replace energy inefficient equipment. A lot of times that's the equipment that's older, it's past its useful life, it's not working very well anymore, and needs to be replaced anyway. And a lot of times we can help fund the replacement of that through this kind of program. Then also looking at things from a standpoint of the human behavior, having an operating plan, making sure that people in the building are utilizing the way it should be utilized, and making sure the building's performing the way it's supposed to. And then we also look at the commissioning of a building, making sure it's working right. And then we use the data analytics to validate that it is working the way it's supposed to and continue to monitor that for a period of time. I had somebody tell me a long time ago, you know, people get pretty excited about solar and wind, and it's renewable, and that's pretty exciting and neat. I had somebody kind of share it this way to me, where energy efficiency is like your vegetables at dinner, and solar is more like your dessert. And so he presented it as you should really do your vegetables first before you have dessert. And energy efficiency in most cases is less expensive to implement than solar or the renewables. So a lot of times we take our clients down a path where we look at the energy efficiency side, try to improve that piece, and then when they get down to a very efficient manner that way, then we look at solar and make sure it's made not to overdo the amount of solar in the space. And ultimately, if you wanted to, you could go to net zero then in that scenario. Typically, people are trying to take it down to about 30 kBTUs per square foot, and then they'll implement enough solar to offset that entire amount of energy into a net zero building. I don't know if you've heard people talk about that. The energy and performance management piece of what we're doing, a lot of times there's a disconnect between maybe a custodian that's on site, a principal that's on site, and then a maintenance person that's maybe not on site. A lot of times there are things that the custodian is making decisions about what's happening in the building, or dealing with certain hot and cold calls and making slight adjustments to things that don't necessarily pay attention to the engineering concepts behind the systems that are in place. And so sometimes the adjustments they make actually cause problems with the system. Same thing, then you get a maintenance person that's involved with that building, but a lot of times they're not at that building all the time, and so they aren't looking at the big picture of the building and how it operates. And so a lot of times we end up playing a role as an engineer and an energy manager, trying to support that communication between all the different people and the pieces that impact the building and how it operates. And so we'll work with the maintenance staff and educate them and communicate with them on how a building should be operated properly. Same thing with a principal, same thing with a custodian, and then make sure there's some consistency in thought. And so our goal is not, kind of like Paul said, our goal is not to take away electric heaters and refrigerators and things to keep people from being able to be comfortable in their spaces. Our goal is to go in and have the systems work the way they're supposed to, and actually provide the comfort that they're supposed to when people are occupying the spaces. The last piece that I'll share with you is the data analytics. That's a word that's used and it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But I wanted to give you a perspective of how we think about it. And we look at a lot of different factors in a building. On the right-hand side, it's a little bit hard to see, but it's our kind of one-page dashboard that we look at. And I took components of it and kind of blew them up here to the left. But the very first part is actually the electric consumption. And so you can see each kind of area where it goes from light to dark is a day. And so I've got about a week and a half worth of data on there. And you can see the 5 days that the building's occupied and the 2 weekend days where it's got less consumption or less usage. So if you take one of those days and flip it on its side and turn it into a heat map, your whole year looks a little bit like this. And so where it's yellow, it's using more energy than where it's green or blue, and then where it's red is where it's using the most energy. And so that's where your peaks are. And typically that happens at a school at the beginning of school in September, October, or August when there's a lot of people that are coming, the hours are maybe a little bit longer, you still have air conditioning needs. And so that's typically where we see those hot spots. But we're also looking at, when does equipment come on in the morning? When does it go off at night? What does Thanksgiving break look like or Christmas break? You can see the kind of green area through there. That's the Christmas break through there. And so the energy piece is one piece that we're looking at. The next one is temperatures, space temperatures. And so we do something, I don't know if you do this at home, but when you're not there, we go into night setback. And what that does, it allows the temperatures to float either up or down, whatever way they're going to go. And then when it comes back to an occupied mode, it brings it back to the right temperatures to be able to be satisfied in the space. And so the two outer lines are those setback temperatures that the temperatures are allowed to float to. And when it hits that, the air conditioning or the heating will come back on to bring it back to temperature. And then so this is the weekend, then this little spot here, that's the weekday. And so when you look at that, you can tell how much time is really utilized in the building versus how much time is not utilized. The other thing that you can see, not so well up here, but probably on your page, you can see some of the temperatures start to float up. Some of the temperatures start to float down. And when it's mild outside, the balance point of a building is about 60 degrees. And so when it's cooler than that outside, it typically floats down. Sometimes we'll see things still float up, and it causes us to kind of scratch our head and wonder what's going on. And sometimes we'll find electric heaters are left on, in the rooms, or it's a space with computers that are left on, those kinds of things that can also add load to the space. This is the outside air dampers. So whenever you heat or air condition a building, you're required to bring in so much outside air for the occupants. That load on a building is about half the energy load for your heating and cooling. So that outside air is really an important component. If you could, on your page, you can see these 3 days, your outside air dampers open all the way because it's cold enough outside that you can actually cool with free outside air. And so it opens all the way. Well, then when you look on this, in the corresponding days on energy, you can see the energy drop down. And so you can see that energy goes way down on those days as well. And that's what we're trying to make sure things work. This is actually when the equipment runs. And so we're watching actual rooftop units on the buildings, when they come on, when they go off. And we see sometimes that units are left off by maintenance staff, or maybe a contractor comes in and did some work on it, forgot to put it back on. Or sometimes we see it running for a long period of time when it shouldn't. And so one of the things that we do with this, at North Kansas City, a lot of their schools are running 6,000 or 8,000 hours for a lot of their equipment. And so by doing some different strategies of how we're operating, now they're running about 600 hours out of a year. And it's kind of equivalent to a car. If you drive a car 100,000 miles in a year, it's going to fall apart a lot faster than if you drive it 10,000 miles in a year. And so, not only are you looking at saving energy and saving maintenance costs, but then also the capital side. Energy is about $1 to $1.50 a square foot. Maintenance is about $5 to $10 a square foot. And then your replacement costs are like $30 to $50 a square foot. And so all of those get impacted by how often your equipment runs and how much it's utilized. Yeah. So this is the last one that I'll share with you. And this is one that is not performing the way it's supposed to. You can see a lot of things running when they're not supposed to be running over here to the right. And then we started to get our arms around it, start to make some modifications. And you can see on your page, probably sitting in front of you, where we reduced the energy consumption by 50 kW. And when you translate that over the period of a year for this high school, that was equivalent to about $21,000 a year. So this stuff all impacts how your buildings operate, how the energy is consumed, and ultimately what we pay for your dollars. So we look at the organizational change, also the behavioral change, and then also the technology change. And so those are all things that as you go back to your district and talk to maybe your facility people or your superintendent or others, those things are important things and make a big difference on what that budget item is and what you end up spending on. Are there any questions? Paul, all right?
If not, we've got
Anybody hungry for lunch?
Yeah, lunch. We've got lunch, and we'll be available throughout lunch if you have any questions we might be able to help with. Again, thank you.
Thank you.